Okay, just for a second, look around you. I mean, really look. That phone in your hand, the clothes you've got on, the chair you're sitting in, even your coffee mug. Almost everything we touch and use every single day comes from the world of manufacturing. It's like this huge invisible engine just humming along in the background, powering our lives. So let's pull back the curtain and see how this whole thing actually works. So our story starts in a really cool place, a super busy Diwali market. Picture this. A young boy named Harish is there with his family, and he's just blown away. There are shoes, clothes, shiny utensils, beautiful little lamps called diyas, just mountains of stuff. And he asks his dad, how? How is all of this even possible? And his father gives him this really simple but actually pretty smart answer. He breaks it all down for him. Some things are made in giant factories, some in smaller workshops, and some, like those little lamps, are even made by artisans right in their own homes. That's a pretty great explanation from his dad, right? But it kind of leaves you hanging with a much bigger question. A question that really gets to the core of, well, everything in our modern world. How does it all really work? I mean, how do you get from, say, a bunch of dirt and rocks to a shiny new car? Or from a plant in a field to the shirt on your back? That's the journey we're going to take today. All right, so let's step away from that colorful market for a minute and zoom in on the machine behind it all. Okay, so what is manufacturing officially? Well, at its heart, it's all about transformation. It's the magic of taking some kind of raw material and turning it into something way more valuable. Think about it, right? We take wood and make paper. We take sugarcane and make, well, sugar. We take iron ore out of the ground and forge it into steel. It's this process of adding value and doing it on a huge scale. That's the name of the game. But here's the thing. It's so much more than just making stuff. Manufacturing is about building entire nations. It's not an exaggeration to say it's the absolute backbone of a country's economy, its development, its prosperity. And what's really cool is how it all connects. It's like a chain reaction. A strong manufacturing sector means better tools and equipment for farmers, which modernizes agriculture. It means jobs, lots and lots of jobs, which is one of the most powerful ways to lift people out of poverty. When a country starts exporting all those goods it's making, it brings in a ton of foreign currency. And at the end of the day, it's about that same idea we talked about, turning cheap raw materials into valuable products. That is how a nation gets wealthy. So here's the bottom line, the big takeaway. If you want to know how strong a country's economy is, just look at its manufacturing industries. Seriously, the level of development there is a direct measure of its economic muscle on the world stage. It's that important. Now, manufacturing is a massive term, right? It covers so much ground. So to really get it, we need to kind of break it down into smaller pieces. Industries are sorted in a few different ways, and this helps us see all the moving parts inside this giant economic engine. So let's take a look. Okay, so one of the simplest ways to slice it is by looking at where the raw materials come from. It's pretty straightforward. On one side, you've got your agro-based industries. These use stuff that we grow. Think cotton, sugar, edible oils. And on the other side, you've got mineral-based industries. This is all the stuff we dig out of the ground. Minerals and metals like iron for steel or stone for cement. Another way to look at it is by asking, who's in charge? Who owns the place? So you have the public sector, which is owned and operated by the government. Think of big state-run companies. Then there's the private sector, which is owned by individuals or groups of people, companies like Tisco or Bajaj Auto. Sometimes you get a mix of the two. That's called the joint sector. And then there's a really interesting one, the cooperative sector. This is where the producers or the workers all band together and own the business themselves, which you see a lot in the sugar industry in Maharashtra, for example. All right, that's enough of the textbook categories. Let's get to the really interesting stuff and look at a couple of powerhouse industries in India that tell a much bigger story about how this all works in the real world. First up, cotton textiles. The history here is just amazing. I mean, we're talking about an industry that goes back to ancient India with hand spinning and hand looms. Then, boom, 1854, the first modern textile mill pops up in Mumbai. Now, it wasn't an easy ride. It took a major hit during the colonial period from competition. But today, it's bounced back to become this incredibly self-reliant industry. It's the only one that handles the entire process, from growing the raw cotton all the way to creating the most valuable finished products. Okay, now for the real bedrock of all modern industry, iron and steel. People call it the basic industry, and for a really good reason. Think about it. You can't build other industries without it. Every other factory, every machine, every car, every bridge, they all depend on iron and steel. It's the skeleton that holds everything else up. And the process itself is just a perfect example of that transformation we were talking about. You start with raw iron ore, right? It gets shipped to a plant where it's melted down in insane heat. They add stuff like limestone to pull out all the impurities. That gunk, called slag, gets scraped off. Then this glowing molten material is poured into molds and gets shaped. It's rolled, pressed, and cast. And what comes out at the end? Steel. The very stuff that our world is built on. So all this progress, all this economic growth, it's incredible. But there's a flip side, a pretty big one actually. We can't have an honest conversation about manufacturing without talking about the price we pay. And I'm talking about the price paid by our environment. When we look at the impact, it really breaks down into four main types of pollution. You've got air pollution from all the smoke and gases. You've got water pollution when industrial waste gets dumped into our rivers and lakes. There's land pollution from chemical waste. And of course, there's noise pollution from all that heavy machinery, which affects both people and wildlife. And check out this statistic. It's pretty staggering. For every 1 liter of wastewater that an industry discharges, it pollutes 8 times that amount of fresh water. Just let that sink in. 1 liter ruins 8. It just shows you how a single source of pollution can have this massive ripple effect, damaging our most precious resource. Okay, so that sounds pretty bad, I know. But it's not all doom and gloom. There is hope. The big conversation now is all about how we can control this damage. The whole focus is shifting from just making things to making things sustainably. So let's look at some of the solutions. Let's go back to that wastewater problem. We actually have a pretty clear 3-step solution for it. First, there's primary treatment. This is basically mechanical, using screens and filters to get the big stuff out. Next up is secondary treatment, which uses biological processes like bacteria to break down the organic waste. And finally, there's tertiary treatment. This is the final polish, using a mix of chemical, physical, and biological methods to get the water super clean. So clean, in fact, that it can often be recycled and used again. And hey, it's not just about the water. There's a whole toolkit of solutions. We can put filters on smokestacks to clean the air. We can switch from dirty fuels like coal to cleaner ones like natural gas. We can put silencers on generators and machines to cut down the noise. We can redesign equipment from the ground up to be way more energy efficient. Even something as simple as planting belts of trees around factories can make a huge difference. And really, this brings us to the great challenge of our era. It's the big puzzle we all have to solve. It's not about choosing between a healthy economy and a healthy planet anymore. The whole idea of sustainable development is that we have to figure out how to weave these two things together, how to make economic progress and environmental protection 2 sides of the same coin. Which leaves us with one final massive question. We know how to do this. The technology is there. We can make industries cleaner, more efficient. We know what's at stake. The real question is, can we actually pull it off? Can we, as a global community, really make economic growth and environmental health work together? Or will that always be fighting each other? Honestly, the answer to that question is what's going to shape the world for generations to come.